Hi everyone, so here's my final PTR wrap up and feedback video. So this is a pretty big one. There was a lot of stuff in this patch, so if you have not seen this, you should probably watch the reveal or some of my previous videos. But TLDR, we are effectively getting a new expansion in this update, just without the class and the new campaign and stuff like that. But in terms of the overall system changes, this is like the biggest patch we have seen basically since Season 6. So when Vessel of Hatred launched, a lot of stuff is being updated. We have new monsters, new affixes, we have new items, tempering, masterworking, the sanctification system, the tower, and a bunch of other stuff. So I want to go through all of that as quickly as I can. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff to cover, and I also want to talk about the individual classes. Just to give a bit of an idea of what I have done here. So I've played every PTR like day, roughly 9 to 10 hours. I try to get as much time in as I could because there was a lot of stuff to try. So in addition to just all these builds here that I've tested, I also have done like a leveling run, for example, because all of that is also changing. And just in general, like trying to get a feel for how the game works now, so that I have, the best possible like starting point basically for making builds, guides, etc. when Season 11 actually goes live in roughly a month from now. I focus a little bit more on the Spiritborn than the others. Spiritborn is also just overall the best class in this patch the way it looks right now. I do expect that there's going to be a lot of balance changes though, because a lot of classes have too many builds that are kind of like down bad. In general, the power level is going down a lot, so this is just like a change from Season 10 to 11. Season 10 being like the craziest season theme we ever had, to almost no season theme at all in terms of like power creep, but the season theme is more like content related this time around. Plus, they actively tried to make the game slower and harder, and that actually worked out relatively well. But there definitely needs to be some tuning here. So Spiritborn is looking very good. Necros as well. So I've done only one build there, but I know that they are really good. And then you have like the other classes that are kind of a little bit behind those. There's maybe one or two kind of like shining builds per class. Like for example, Crackle Sorc is maybe like the best build in the game, but Sorc overall is just not a very good class with the way things are looking right now, for example. So there's like some stuff like that. And yeah, we have like kind of similar cases on other classes, like Barb is pretty good, but then not really much else on a class. There's a bunch of like okay stuff. And similar with rogues, they have like a bunch of okay builds and so on. So they definitely expect a bunch of class updates here, but I will not too much talk about the numbers here. I will talk more about problems with those classes later. But yeah, let's jump in here. Let's talk about one of the biggest updates that we have seen here, which is Toughness. So what is Toughness? That's a combined value of your life and your damage reduction effects. It's similar to Diablo 3's Toughness, where you just get like a value that is not exactly a real stat, but it's like a fake stat basically based on combining your life with DR, which is very nice. This is actually a very helpful tool in order to assess your survivability, which previously was just not really possible. So especially from like a hardcore player perspective, we can't really do this kind of limit testing where, I just walk in and I see how much damage I take. Well, that's just not really what you do. And Toughness is designed to be much more comparable, and it actually does that job relatively well. The main issue I really had with Toughness was that it was difficult to compare the values before and after. So for example, when I go into my skill tree, paragons, like anti-chanter, like I would have to like select the thing and then check my Toughness before and then calculate against the value after and so on. So that was really bothersome, and I would like to see that changed to be a more quality of life. I would also like to see max life again. I think by itself, this is still a valuable piece of information to have. Right now, you can only see that when you hover over Toughness. So it kind of gives you like the breakdown of the max hit taken or max damage taken without healing for each elemental type, which is kind of cool. But I would also like to see effective HP, for example. And I would also like to see a full list of all conditional DR effects. So for example, there's a bunch of passives and Dark Shroud and these kind of things. I don't want them to necessarily be calculated into the Toughness, but at the very least, I want to have them there so I don't have to like always remember everything in my head, and then I can do the napkin myself basically. And we also have the issue, Armor and Res is way behind life. Now that does make some sort of sense, which is that you need less healing when you have more damage reduction and lower maximum HP, but the values are way off. Like an armor roll or res roll gives you, I don't know what, a quarter or so of a life roll. So that is like not anywhere close to where it should be. Barriers are giga bugged, so this doesn't actually make you you know, really tanky, but the toughness number just goes through the roof basically. You go from like 100k to like 5 million when you have a barrier for some reason. So that is just like not helpful. Fortify. That was an interesting update. So it's now no longer damage reduction. It is giving you like effectively a second health bar that drains when you take damage and then refills your real life, which is very nice, especially in early game. I found this to be very helpful, but in late game, most of the time you heal either from like instant healing with potions or from just instant healing with like a life on hit or something like Mariana and so on. There's a lot of really strong like healing effects, and most of the late game combat revolves around, you know, either like getting one shot or avoiding one shots basically, or something really close to that. There's not a lot of attrition going on. I would like to see that maybe change to be more about, you know, a back and forth, more about like kind of like, you know, for example, fortify and life potions as a resource that you use in combat. And we also have this problem still since the hit expansion that we have very low base life pool. And we get interrupted instantly by everything when we get touched by, you know, monsters, when we click on an object or when we teleport. So this was intentionally designed to not work that way in Diablo 4, but it does. And I think we need to make this work with real life, with not just the base life, and with all of the damage reduction effects, so that we can actually, you know, have a lot of the frustration taken out of the system. Now let's talk about monsters. So there's like 25 new elite affixes or something. A few were removed, a few were tweaked, but a lot of new stuff in there, and also stuff that is not just like kind of like environmental effects, but also directly affecting the monster themselves. There's like damage reduction and like you know, soul drinker that buffs them when you kill enemies nearby and stuff like that. So lots of interesting stuff, and definitely combat has gotten better, I think. I think the visual clarity did go down a lot though, so there's usually a lot of overlapping elite affixes, so maybe this could be like fixed a little bit. So especially like, you know, doing like a tower push or something like that. You have like multiple elite packs at the same time. There's so much stuff going on, and some elite affixes just got like not so easily visible anymore, like fire enchanted explosions, for example. They look worse than before, I think. So I would like to see a bit more work being put into that stuff, but I also would like to see a full list of what of the elite affixes actually do, because, okay, we can try to somewhat reverse engineer it, but I don't think we're ever gonna get it right, because some stuff is just like invisible, and I have no idea what half the affixes do basically, besides those that actually have some sort of like visual or like environmental effect, for example. I also noticed that, for example, leveling 1 to 15 is very rough. Monsters are like, you know, way more accurate, way faster, way more aggro and so on. And even like leveling on hard difficulty is really tough when you don't use the extra skill points you get, which now you have to unlock when you start a fresh season. So you start with 1 skill point and not with 12 anymore. And you have no healing, you have no recovery, unless you have like something built in your class or in your skill, but there's not really that much of that at the very low levels. There's like maybe lunging strike on a barb that I can think of right now, and some siphoning strikes on a rogue maybe, and maybe a few other examples. But yeah, no healing at all. It's basically just you have potion healing and that's it, and that makes it, at least the very first levels, really tough. So I think this could be retuned a little bit, or maybe you get like maybe slightly more heal potion drops or something like that at least. Then there's also a few affixes, like, you know, Execution is like some floating sword that follows you around. It just follows you forever until you let it reach you, basically. It looks kind of silly. Yeah, in general, like a bit of like retuning here, but there's like some examples I mentioned. We also had bosses and the maggots in Hell Tides giving insane amounts of XP. So that is obviously bugged, but I just want to mention it. I do expect this to be like super nerfed and like fixed, because right now this was crazy. Like people were getting like I don't know, 15 level ups from one world boss kill or something like that. It was insane, and people were like farming just Asmodan non-stop, and then, you know, farming to Paragon 300 even or something like that. So that is obviously not going to happen. But yeah, this needs to go way down. And yeah, in general though, I think that the monster changes are really good. It is definitely noticeable how the fights are different. I would like to see some more like tuning here where like, you know, we see stuff better, and you know, some individually the affixes definitely need a look here, but overall this is looking fine. Then we have the tower. So here we go. This is what you see in action right now. This is basically a pit 2.0. There's 2 versions of pit now, basically. There's tower and the pit, and tower is the leaderboard feature. So a lot of people ask, like, why does it even exist? Why did they make a second feature and not just like, change the pit, for example. So my guess on this is that now they have two systems where one is designed for farming and like glyphs and so on, and the other one is designed for leaderboards. And right now they look very similar, but in like a season or 2 or 3 from now, they will look completely different. So that's at least my expectation. They have the option now to make both these systems very different from one another, where, the pit maybe becomes some sort of like mapping experience with customization and whatever, and the tower is like, fixed and, has other stuff going on basically. So this is kind of what I expect here. But with that being said, let's look at what the tower is right now and then where it should go from here. So first of all, I would like to see that we can unlock towers, through other stuff. Like right now, actually, I think you had to do the pit in order to unlock the tower. I'm not sure if it should be necessarily that. I think it would maybe make sense if the unlocks are separate, but there are some sort of milestones that you get so that, don't start a tower at tier 1 when you have like a fully built character after 100 hours of blasting, for example, because this is the time when you start doing the tower and to try to go for leaderboards or something like that. So maybe like we start at tower 55 when you unlock tower 4 or something like that at least. At the very minimum, the tower tiers should unlock themselves. So when I clear a tower, I want to go to the next because I want to push higher. So that was kind of stupid on the PTR. A general issue in the system is that the pylons and bosses were way too tanky to the point where I think they were just bugged, because killing a pylon was like 4 rare leads worth of HP or something like that. And the bosses were like at least double or maybe triple as tanky as in the pit on the same tier. So yeah, we definitely expect those two things to go way down, but I want to mention it. And yeah, in general, I think the tower, at least right now, is still too much focused on in a kind of like, DPS check and stat check, and too little on the gameplay. So if you compare this to, like, for example, Diablo 3 Greater Earth pushing, that was, quite different there. And I would like to see us move more towards the Diablo 3 style, tower being a leaderboard feature for, showing off your ability to play the game, and not so much just how strong a build is. Obviously that should matter, but right now it matters too much, I think. Then we have missing checkpoints. So yeah, this is, you die on the boss on floor 3 and you spawn in floor 1. That's kind of funny. Yeah, there's a delay on progression orbs. So basically every time you kill a pack similar to the 3, there's like progression orbs popping out. But sometimes they have this kind of weird delay. They also don't have very good like visual feedback. Like in Diablo 3, collecting progression orbs feels really good, because like, you see like the orbs like kind of floating, and then like you have like this animation that goes to your progression bar, and then the progression bar highlights for like a second, and it feels good. I want to see that, because right now you just kind of like, soak them up and that's it. And it's kind of like, it doesn't have the same dopamine feel. Then we have a boss that heals. I don't mind that, but at the very least, make it only heal when it hits me and not when it hits my merc. That is stupid. We also have another boss that goes invisible. I think that should not happen. Yeah, and in general, one thing I noticed is that the tower was a lot more fun when I was playing builds that didn't just like group everything into like 1 pixel, and my enemies were actually fighting me and they were like running around, and like everything was like chaotic. So this is the moments when it was actually the most interesting. And for example, when I was playing a Spiritborn and I have my like Protector ult or my Vortex, and everything just gets pixeled and down and like locked down in like, one little spot, and I just like kind of like whack at them. It felt very similar to like the old like kind of pit pushing experience right now. And I think this is a general problem with Diablo 4's crowd control system. We have way too crazy ways to pull monsters together, and at least in a tower, especially in like pushing scenario, this just becomes yeah, very boring and yeah, not too fun to play. Where in D3, for example, like, we actually have to like focus more on like kiting enemies around, and they were usually just fighting you back, and he didn't crowd control them too much, he didn't pull them too much, and that makes combat a lot more interesting. So yeah, I would like to see nerfs to player abilities that group enemies, or at the very least make some sort of different crowd control rules in the tower, maybe. That would be something as well, or something along those lines at least, so that we have monsters actually fighting us, and not so much just being like stun locked in like 1 pixel pull that you get to do way too easily. Then we have the bosses. So in general, the bosses were way too tanky, but again, this was probably mostly a bug. But even when that is fixed and monsters are not as tanky as they were on the PTR, I think there's still too much tank and spank, too little stuff going on, because most of the time you will survive bosses easily, because the elites are way harder to survive. So this is just how it is. You have to make a character quite tanky in order to even get to the end, and not so much to fight the boss. So I would like to see more kind of like dynamic DPS elements. We have that, for example, on the Rogue with like the Deadeye passive. If you're distant, you deal more damage. I want more stuff like that, like across all builds, across all classes. I want to get stuff like Skirt's Necklace from D3. I want to get stuff like Oculus Ring from D3. This is what makes combat actually fun and interesting, and where I can actually, like, also kind of start fixing this element here, right? So, if you make these sort of dynamic DPS elements, then of course it's still like a DPS check, but you can influence your DPS by playing better. And that is kind of the important part here. And this is really missing in Diablo 4 as a whole most of the time. Most builds are very one-dimensional, and there's no way to press the button harder to do more damage. So I want to get these kind of elements here to make this more interesting. And then there was a lot of like discussion about, okay, what about showing builds on a leaderboard? Personally, I am not really much for or against it. I guess in D3 we have seen that being introduced very early on, and then it just has kind of become an accepted part of it. But there is also some sort of like interesting thought here, which is that someone can actually try to free craft a really cool build, and they get the rank 1 with that or something. So that is also kind of like a nice option. There was like one really cool compromise that someone mentioned, which is that maybe the builds are secret until the end of the season, or until the end of the leaderboard or something like that. So that would also be pretty cool, I think, especially if the leaderboard is not seasonal, but, for example, the gauntlet was weekly. If you get something like that in the tower, where we actually have like frequent resets and maybe even shifting metas or even shifting rules inside the tower, that could be kind of fun. And then it's like, okay, you can see what people have used, but only after the week has ended, for example. So I wouldn't mind something like that. Either way, no matter what happens, I would like this to be a good feature, so that if we inspect someone, this needs to be like smooth and not like 3 different clicks and then I have to wait like 5 seconds until it loads the profile. Like, I want to look at the leaderboard and I want to see the skill bar that's used, similar to like Helltides, for example. So we have that's like, very nicely shown, because some classes actually have multiple good builds, and I don't want to like click through every single profile to look at the skill bar and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be extremely annoying and just not really quality of life. And then we have the pylons. So there's 3 different pylons. So we have power, channeling, and speed, very D3 style as well. The problem is one of them matters and the other 2 don't. And then the one that matters, you can get it twice with a 1 in 3 chance, because there's 4 pylons in each run and one of them is duplicated. So channeling and speed need to be straight up deleted, I think, and they need to make new pylons in their stead that are actually useful, because no build cares about channeling or speed. If you go into the tower, you have an endgame build that is figured out, that is decked out, that has everything you need. You don't need resources, you don't need cooldown, and you certainly don't need speed, because you're already capped on everything anyway when you go into the tower. So all of these pylons don't matter. And there's like almost no scenario where you get any sort of upgrade from this, basically. So in that case, yeah, these pylons just need to go. We need new pylons that are similar to the power. And other than that, I wouldn't mind if there's like even more pylons that are not just like the same 3. Maybe there could be at least 4, so they don't get a duplicate. So you get 4 pylons, but you get 1 of each. Or maybe there could be 10 different pylons, and they all have like some sort of similar power gain or something like that. But obviously we'd have to design a lot of stuff there. Like, this is very bland and completely useless. And yeah, also when you actually unlock the pylon, it takes way too long. So that needs to be faster and more easily clickable. And yeah, long term for the tower, they said that there's going to be big updates, like season by season, for like a while to come, basically. So yeah, we have a good start here. There's like the goblin in there and the monster race that spawned. That makes it a bit like interesting and dynamic and something to play around. We need more stuff of that. I would also like to see maybe some sort of like WoW Mythic Style Plus system. I mentioned that, for example, if there's like, like weekly rotations or something like that, it'll be really cool if you go in and there's like a new affixes and there's like environmental effects. Maybe there's like a player buff. Maybe there's like a twist to the boss fight. Maybe there's a twist to the elites and so on. So you could have like some sort of like different categories of affixes, and then each of those categories has like 5 random options, and they combine into like this week's tower setup, for example. So something like this could be very cool, I think, to kind of like keep this fresh and engaging week by week. to potentially even like shift the meta a little bit week by week, or at least give you like something new to chew on and something to figure out, and at least tactically play around it. And there could also be like upsides, not just downsides, for example. Now let's talk about tempering. So tempering is now only one affix. You can choose it, and you can always get the perfect outcome. You can even GA it if you want these days. So that is kind of interesting. I'm a fan of the system. It makes the choices much more meaningful, I think. So you just have really tough choices to make. Do you want extra size? Do you want extra damage? Do you want extra defense or speed? Do you want extra resources or cooldown or extra damage, and so on? So most of the time, you actually have like a tough decision to make. I would like to see though that, for example, in this new 4 affix base loot, we get a bit more variety, because right now like all items feel very similar. There's like, main stat, life, and then, I don't know, attack speed and core ranks on your glove. And then you have like main stat, life, armor res on your pants, and so on. So it's always like main stat and life, and where I can, and then maybe 1 damage stat or 2, and that's about it. So maybe they could take some of the like temper stuff, cull the list in general, because there's so many like random tempers that we will never ever use again. So you just have like way too much of a list when you go to the blacksmith. And just kind of get rid of like 80% of that, and then take some of it and bake it into the base affix pool. Something like just as an example, a core skill AoE size. So not just Hoda size, upheaval size, and rend size, but you kind of like make this like 1 stat, and it can roll for all the classes, or something like that. And you could make the base items a little bit more interesting. But overall, I don't really have a lot of things to say about tempering. I like it. And the new changes, I think, will be much less frustrating, and it definitely helps with like feeling good about the loot that you find, because you don't have the risk of bricking it before you ever get to try it. So that's kind of like the one big change here. They could have obviously done this with like a smaller change, like just giving us infinite scrolls of restoration, for example. They've actually done that. Yeah, this is what we got now, and I think this is fine. Then we have Masterworking. So this is much less fine, I think. So Masterworking has gone down a lot in like how much power it gives. Previously it was ridiculous, and I think that needed some tuning down, like, especially cooldown reduction effects like Shaco, evade cooldown for the teleport to the Sorc, and, maybe other stuff like that. Like it's kind of scaled too crazy. Now it's, like a less crazy system, but also a much more boring system. So that is kind of like a takeaway here. Personally, I think there could have been a different rework that would have been like more fun while keeping the game kind of like sane and healthy. But this is what we got now. At the very least, I think that we're clicking way too much. Like there's like 10 clicks required to get to 20 quality, and no one is gonna like do this like, go to town, click once, oh, I run out of up to side, let me go farm more now, and then I go farm more, and then I come back and click twice again. Like this is not happening. And even if you do that, you will not notice any sort of difference on your character at all. Compared to before, we actually had like at least the 4, 8, and 12 steps, and you actually notice a bit of like a jump there. So maybe they can try to bring something like that back a little bit, but at least the way it works right now is like not really good. So overall, I think this Masterworking system, like, it takes out a lot of the frustration of the resetting and the triple crits and so on, but it didn't really make the game better. So I think we need more on top of these systems that we have now. We need like a real crafting system. We need something to really have like interesting outcomes on our items, and cool stuff to work towards in a late game. Masterworking seems to me like, okay, this is just kind of like the stepping stone for such a system. So yeah, I guess it's wait and see for now. Let's talk about Sanctification. This is a seasonal feature. So this is effectively Varlobs on PoE. So you corrupt the items, effectively they're called sanctified now, they become unmodifiable, and they get 1 extra random effect. There's like the get nothing, which is item becomes indestructible. Then there is the replace a stat that can potentially destroy your item if it replaces a key stat that you really care about. But most of the time it's just pure upside. You get an extra stat added, you get an extra aspect added, you can make a GA. So you're gonna do this on everything all the time, basically, at the very least once you have one backup version of that item. So you might not do this on like your first Shaco that you find, because it might replace cooldown and then oof. But for everything else, this is actually a excellent item deletion machine, I think. So this is something I've been waiting for like 2 years in this game, and I'm glad that we get it now, because Diablo 4, much different from PoE actually, has exact copies of items. You get like 10 times the same glove, you get 20 times the same pants, and so on as you play your character. So now we can actually do something with that besides putting it all to the salvage. And this is really cool about it. And you have some kind of exciting gamba on your gear that could actually like give you like some nice power spike later on. Especially once the offensive aspects are fixed. Right now, they did not exist on a PTR, and you very often got like this Sanctification failed tooltip. So that was kind of, yeah, it was missing. So there's a lot of power that we're going to gain from the system, which is, you know, quite high RNG, but it's also like very late game, something that you only really care about once you are, you know, ready to push like, you know, pit 90 plus anyway or something like that. And then you can go like a few tiers up maybe because you get another maybe ×2, maybe ×3 or so from like the perfect outcomes in every slot or something. So this is basically how this is gonna go. Personally, I think it's gonna be super fun. And yeah, this was a nice addition here. I would actually like to see this come back in the future. So right now this is just a seasonal feature, but I would hope that they take the learnings from season 11 and, you know, tweak this more, maybe make this even more interesting and cool, and then bring this like as a permanent, like, you know, late game grind feature that it can do. This could even be something like Sanctification mats only start dropping in Torment 4, for example. You don't really need it before that anyway. You don't really have a lot of like copies of items before that anyway. You're just kind of progressing through the game anyway, right? So in that case, we could also maybe start making a distinction between like, you know, early endgame and late endgame, for example. And then with what I discussed about, you know, crafting features, there could be similar stuff like that that actually has a bit of like a reason to go into higher torments, to actually struggle your way through the game and, you know, unlocking all that stuff. Because I don't really like how in Diablo 4, like you go into Torment 1 and you're decked out with 800 gear in no time, and then, you know, you don't really progress much anymore from there. And this is very noticeable in the current like PTR game, basically. And you get a few uniques, they give you like some huge power spikes, and that's about it, basically. And then you get a bunch of mythics later, they give you another power spike, and that's it, right? And like the gear just kind of like stays the same all the way through the end game. And something like Sanctification that only unlocks when you Torment 4 or something like that, and maybe some crafting feature similar to that as well. That could be a lot more fun for like actually, you know, pushing people towards, you know, trying to get through the entire game, basically. Then we have Capstone dungeons. So those are coming back. We have 5 of them in total. So first of all, I'm very glad to see them back. I don't have really much to say about them. The first and second one are relatively long, and I like that actually, because they are like actually feeling different from other dungeons. So that's kind of cool. Third one is also kind of long. And then the last 2 are relatively short. You kind of just like rush through and kill the boss. That's it. I did notice that the bonus objectives are all completely worthless, so they need to be buffed if you want us to use them. And in general, I feel like compared to the old capstones, it was not really worth to go in there early. So it was just kind of, yeah, you do it at some point and that's it. And most of the time it would even be like the preferred choice to like do them late. So when you're already over leveled, just so you can like rush through, kill the boss instantly, and then not really waste a lot of time in there, and rather just spend more time leveling up, for example. So compared to like the past where you actually had to do them to then unlock World Tier 3 and then unlock World Tier 4, and you get like this, you know, upgrade in, okay, now you get sacred items, now you get ancestral items, now you get a lot more XP because the monsters are higher level and they give a bigger multiplier. Like all of that is not really happening when you do the capstones. You get like 1 skill point from the first one and then I think another one from the second one or something, and some small stuff. Okay, you unlock the pit, but if you struggle your way through the capstone, then you're not going to go into the pit anyway. You need to be very powerful to, like, you know, do the capstone very easily, so that then maybe you would consider going into the pit before level 60, for example. So realistically, this is going to be very close to 60 anyway, and don't really have a big advantage of unlocking the pit very early, unless you're like twinking out your character. Like, okay, of course, if you equip like 4 mythics at level 35, and one of them is a weapon, then yeah, you're going to blast through the stuff, and then you can go to the pit at like level 40 or something. But realistically, for like a season start scenario, I would like to see a bigger reason to go into the capstones early. You could even do something like, okay, expert difficulty unlocks when you do the first capstone, and then penitent difficulty unlocks when you do the second capstone, or something like that. So that you have a bit similar to like the old world tier system, where you get like this boost. If you're powerful enough, then you can go there. And I think this would also help people to not necessarily get baited into like the higher leveling difficulties, because even normal and hard are not completely trivial when you start out. I discussed this earlier with the leveling experience. So especially at the start, when you don't have aspects and so on, you are pretty weak and you will struggle. So if people like load in and they open Penitent at level 10, they will get annihilated. And in that case, it would make sense to kind of like unlock those difficulties maybe also with the capstones, for example. And while we're on the topic of leveling, the Vessel of Hater campaign is still by far the best leveling method. In fact, it got better this time around. So you're gonna see people reaching like level 60 in like 90 minutes or so. I'm not sure if that is really the way. I think it's like a lot of fun to actually like level through the different systems that we have and engage with the season theme. It incentivizes you to like go do this, go do that, see like a little bit of everything as you go through leveling. And I think that's actually kind of nice. I don't want the leveling in the campaign to be like the best option here, so I think maybe it's time to change that. Now let's talk about classes. So let's start with the Barb. So we have, well, basically no core skills that are really good. Yeah, there was Hoda on the PTR, but that was basically just they forgot to like put a cap on Ramalani and Hoda, so it was like 35 pit tiers stronger than it should be. So keep that in mind. Anything you saw with Hoda on the PTR, deduct at least 30 pit tiers. In general, core skills are just kind of down bad. You also have stuff like Death Blow and Hoda and Upheaval are all the same thing with all they have like this kind of like shockwave feel to it. They need like some identity. Yeah, bleeds are not a thing really. Maybe flay a little bit or something, but that's about it. There's this new kick stuff with the new pants, but I don't think this feels really good. I tried it very briefly, but it has like this very tiny AoE and doesn't have good coverage, for example. People will probably try this, but I don't expect much. Dual Wield is completely dead unless you play Double Swing or Frenzy that cannot do anything else because they changed Ramaladnis in Season 10 with the Chaos items. And so everyone now wants to go two-handed weapons. I don't really mind that for like a little while, but at least there should be some sort of identity for dual wielding versus two-handed. And right now it's just you go two-handed and that's it. So there's not any upside at all to dual wielding basically. And yeah, kind of similar with the expertise slots. I guess that has to do with that partly. All of the one-handed expertise and technique options are complete trash. At the very least, we do have some options now for choosing the technique slot. So there is, like for example, polearm and two-handed axe. That is kind of okay. Even two-handed mace is kind of okay in some options, but they're all kind of like very similar, just like DPS boost in one shape or another. And not really any interesting stuff going on most of the time. So yeah, Barb definitely needs a lot of help. I think a lot of the core skills especially should be buffed. Maybe some of the Paragon boards should be buffed because they have a bunch of like really weak options here that just could help the class as a whole, and then it would be looking much better. Then we have the Druids. Oof. Yeah, I mean, for Druids, there was only really one direction from Season 10. They were like insane in Season 10. They had the craziest season powers as well, and then I had the Ravens build, and they were just giga chats, unkillable, destroying everything. So obviously, we can only go in one direction. But I think defenses were definitely nerfed too much. Even on something like Polarize, it did not feel very comfy, but okay. But yeah, Wolves are just like not a thing. Like they don't have enough damage reduction. They need something here. At least pre-Sanctification, because at least I have like a good aspect for the wolf form and so on. But that is something that's going to be like very luxury for late game. In general, also the wolf builds are just kind of like on the weaker side of builds. Tornado with wolf and so on, or like a shred is maybe okay DPS wise, but it's just not really like the same as Pulv. And yeah, Lightning Storm is also kind of down bad. So all of these builds need a big buff here on offense and defense. Polarize is the best build, but it has still like the same puzzle bugs from before, so those need to be addressed or else it's going to be a disaster. I would also like to see something with Ravens and companions in general. So Season 10 had like this core skill Ravens so you could spam all the time. That was really fun. So maybe that was a bit too crazy, but at least it was fun. And I think we have a problem with this pack leader Spiritborn, because you always have to like glue your eyes to the skill bar in order to like understand when it's ready. There's no real good like visual or sound indicator for that, or anything else, and it's like so inconsistent. Sometimes it triggers every second, twice per second, 3 times per second. Sometimes it doesn't trigger at all for 5 seconds. It just feels terrible. So I want to see something more consistent here, similar to like other maybe faster cooldown effects we have. Grizzly Rage was reworked, so that now also just strictly feels worse. It does make more sense the way it works, I think, where it's like a big DPS cooldown and you enter like beast mode, and now you're like OP for a little bit. So I like that part of it, but the OP part is too much compared to the like not having Grizzly Rage up at all, especially if you combine this with the aspects. Like the Grizzly Rage aspects were completely unchanged, and they need to change with the Grizzly Rage, because right now you either run Grizzly Rage and you ignore the aspects, and then, okay, it's kind of where it should be, but it's not really the way. The way is you go Grizzly Rage and you just accept that you have like a 10-second gap in your damage sometimes, and that's it. So that is just bad. So we need some updates there. The new unique boots are relatively worthless besides, stat stick. I think they could get some cooler effect maybe. And one thing I noticed when I was leveling Druid, you unlock all the Spirit Boons at level 15 and get like this insane like power spike, which, I mean, okay, that's cool and all, but I think it would feel a lot better when, for example, every 5 levels we get a Spirit Boon unlock and we're not getting like so overwhelmed with like all the choices at once. So I think this would generally help the leveling experience. And Ancestor Guidance is uncapped right now. Same story with the Barbs, with Selic. So Cataclysm is doing like 300 times more damage than it should do, which is probably a bit too much. Then we have the Necros. So I tried a Golem build. So this is actually a pretty fun build. So even as a not minion enjoyer, I found this to be relatively interesting because you actually have like a button to press with relatively good consistency. Even though it's cooldown based, you get to the point where you kind of spam it like once or twice per second. So that's kind of nice. So that was okay. I'm not sure like how exactly they compare to other minion builds, but minions traditionally have been pretty good since season 4. So I'm not really too worried about the other minion stuff. But blood builds, oh boy. So they need something big. I would like to play some Blood Surge again or Bloodlands, but these builds just have been completely dead since years, I think. So something could happen there maybe. Paragons also continues to like disappoint me on the Necro. There's so many Paragon bots that are just like not really a good fit for many builds, and you don't really want to have like a 5th board and you have to like play around either the Blood Orbs or the Corpses, and I don't really want to do that on some builds. I keep saying the same thing every season, and I hope that something changes at some point. And even then, like the nodes individually on the boards, like even the rare nodes, are sometimes just absolute trash. So there needs to be some update here. I would also like to see some old school Bone Spear build, not this like Blood Spear and this kind of stuff. I want to see like this, you know, shotgunning with the right positioning. That was super fun, like back in season 1 or season 2 or so. That also has been completely dead for a long time. But yeah, at least the power level of Necros is generally pretty high and they're generally doing pretty well. We also get like, for example, Extra Unstoppable now from the Golem stuff here, or you know, some other tweaks that they can do. But yeah, this still remains a bit of an issue for Necros as a whole. No mobility, low Unstoppable, Blood Mist being a pretty terrible skill. So maybe something could change there. And I think Reaper's Pursuit passive is just bad design. This is just, okay, put random darkness skills on your bar so you get more damage, which is, this is not how it should work. You know, I want to have 6 skills on my bar that I actually want to press, and not like 4 of them that are just there for decoration, basically. Then we have the Rogue. There's a lot of stuff that I have to talk about here. So Rogue, I gotta say, since the expansion has been like a step backwards, and it has not really gotten a lot better, I think. I liked Rogue a lot before the expansion, and I have not really liked it that much since then. Just talking about like Dance on Ice real quick as like the new thing. We have the new pants. Those are not enough. We need, I don't know, something else here. So the damage is not there. You still go Poison Trap later. It helps you to progress a little bit longer through like the Torment levels, but at the latest in Torment 4, you don't want to play pure Dance on Knives anymore. You're gonna play like Poison Trap Dance on Knives, and the new pants are gonna be worthless. It also has still this charge mechanic. I would be much happier if it just allowed us to spend energy, for example, and call it a day. And then we can maybe even get other synergies. We could also get something like a mobility tag for Dance on Knives. That would help a lot with some of the synergies. Core tag potentially would help a lot. So there's a bunch of stuff here, but the new paints ain't it. So this is just what I have to say. That being said, Dance on Knives with Poison Trap is still a decent farming build. In general, Rogue has a bunch of like, decent options here. There's also Heartseeker. I played Roa. Death Trap, I'm not sure where we will land, if that is going to be a thing or not, but at the very least Death Trap is going to be a very like macro heavy build most likely, the way it looks right now. So yeah, not really something I can recommend. And yeah, so Rogues in general need a bit of help. All the Maker also, like, it got introduced and then it just never really changed for the better. It's still like extremely clunky. It's a very fun concept. I like crossbows in PoE 2 a lot, and it seems like they want to do something like that, but it's just terrible to play really in D4. So something needs to happen. And then yeah, all of the class mechanics I have an issue with, actually. I think preparation is too ridiculous, like resetting all of your ultimates like, you know, every second or multiple times per second in some builds, or at least like so fast. It definitely has issues. It's just like spam fiesta and not really much like tactical gameplay anymore. So I'd like to see a nerf to that. and some general buff to the class, obviously, because rogues are relatively weak. I don't want to just nerf rogues when they're already weak. I want to change this and then make rogues generally better, right? So this is what I mean. Same with combo points, they're just really bad and they need something really big. And also inner sight is just like completely worthless. So this was something that we used like 2 years ago maybe. And then these days, okay, it gives you a small damage multiplier when it's active or something like that. But the primary effect of it with resources is just like not used for anything. So I think rogues in general need like a whole overhaul of the entire class mechanic. Everything sucks basically, either because of gameplay reasons, this is like too good basically, and then it makes it like just like face roll all the cooldowns non-stop, which is just also not really that fun. I'd like to see a bit more like like tactical element. And yeah, like then we have like the other two that are just really bad and it's barely any builds. Okay, I played like Rapid Fire with combo points. There's like this odd build here and there where this is used, but realistically, preparation goes into like every real build these days, and yeah, the others are not really it. Imbuements also need something, so this is also something I've been saying for many seasons, but I would like to see some sort of toggle system, for example, like you turn them on and then the charges come back, let's say 1 charge every 3 seconds as a baseline. And, then it just uses it whenever it's ready automatically, right? It's just like an on-off. And maybe we can have multiple imbuements, or we can at least swap between imbuements and have multiple imbuements on our bar. And you could do some really cool stuff with a system like that. I think the old imbuement system that we have right now is just completely outdated and doesn't really work in like 2025. You also have a lot of builds that still rely too much on crowd controls, which makes boss fights really horrible. So I would like to see that changed. Unstable elixirs is just an annoying passive, I think, like pressing the potion for offense every 10 seconds is just not it, I think. And yeah, in general, rogues need a lot of help here. Then we have the Sorcs. So I mentioned Crackle. Crackle is extremely good. So this is probably like my #1 build of the season, I would say right now. It's not necessarily the highest pit pusher, but it's pretty close. And it's definitely the fastest overall build, really smooth. So that one is nice. But outside of that, we don't really have too much going on the Sorc. So okay, there's a bit of Hydra still that is kind of decent. There's like Frozen Authors rework, but it's definitely too weak to really compare to this. So in general, I think a lot of stuff on Sorc needs to go up. Like we just don't have enough like power in especially the core builds, so all of them could be buffed honestly, and a bunch of them are like just completely dead, like I don't know, Ice Shards for example. Like, I don't know if anyone even plays that, and certainly not in season 11 I think. The new maze is really cool, but it does make all of the builds feel very similar to how we had like all of the defensive skills on a bar. Now we have no defensive skills on a bar, and what else is there to press? Well, conjurations I guess, and that's about it. I think we need like an update to like, especially like mastery skills, for example, to be like some sort of like utility tools. Like I want to see a meteor with a 10-second cooldown that pulls in the entire screen when it lands, I want to see, I don't know, the blizzard that's just like, like insta freezes the entire screen with like a 10 seconds cooldown or something like that, some sort of utility effects that are cool and impactful and that give us some reason to have those skills instead of an ice armor and instead of a flame shield and instead of a frost nova or something like that. So, this would be very fun. And yeah, maybe like, expansion will bring something like this, but right now this is really like one of the big Sorc issues, I think. Then we can talk about the teleport enchant nerf. The people were like dooming, this is the end of the world, but it turns out Sorc is still the fastest class. Okay, maybe outside of like Evade, Spiritborn or so, maybe Evade wins, but then Sorc is #2, and Sorc has many builds that use teleport, not just one build like the Spiritborn, for example. So yeah, they're gonna be fine. It didn't feel bad at all, and in fact we had like the option now to go multiple evade charges on the boots instead of the attacks reduce evade cooldown. So you can actually do like 4 or 5 teleports in a row, like ding, 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 ding. And that actually feels really fun. It also makes it very mobile during pushing even, where I usually don't have a lot of mobility with the new mace, for example. So that was all really cool. And overall, I think the Sorcs have not much to complain about here. Obviously, for the Sorc enjoyers and for the perma-teleport enjoyers, it does feel worse. The mobility is going down, but Sorc is still the best, I think, across the board. So there's not really much I can say here. And yeah, besides that, some builds like Meteor cooldown that could be changed. Basic builds don't exist. Incinerate, I would love to see maybe something as like a, walk while channeling kind of option here. That would be very fun. Deep freeze is just like not a thing. And Elemental Synergies passive, similar to the Reaper's Pursuit on a Necro, it's just like, okay, put more random skills on your bar so you get a damage buff. That's kind of stupid. So I would like to see that changed as well. And lastly, we have the Spiritborn. So number one, really, the problem is that there's a bunch of bugs with the Spirit Halls. I did bug report this, but the TLDR is Jaguar main hall is a really fun build, but it has some snapshotting issues with unyielding hits. Evade is bugged actually in the PTR, so I did notice this on the last day when I tried Evade. So that was roughly 10 tiers stronger than it should be. It was by far the strongest build on the PTR basically. And yeah, it turns out when they fix that, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be like the push meta, and it's still going to be an extremely good, probably the best progression and farming build in the game, basically, maybe barring Crackling Sorc or something. And that's it. So once those the things are addressed, it's going to be fine. Centipede main hall was way too weak, so I was kind of excited for something like that, but did not really check out. In general, the poison builds have big single target issues. They have really good AoE most of the time when you have a large pack, and then it just completely fall off on the boss. So we need some sort of help here for all of the poison builds. You also have the issue that, for example, Stinger is better with Kapeleke than with Swarms. So that should be changed as well. And yeah, also like the visuals on some of the skills are a little bit too much. But yeah, overall, I gotta say I'm pretty happy with where Spiritborn lands. We have a lot of build variety, like many builds that push like 90 plus or so, and I think Spiritborn enjoyers are gonna love this season because there's so much good stuff. I would like to see like Devour rework, but I guess that's not gonna happen now in season 11. But it's like the one ultimate that has no purpose. It looks cool. It's like my favorite skill on this class, but yeah, we need something here. So yeah, some badass, maybe even pet skill. I would also maybe like to see some sort of like Archon form, D3 wizard style like transformation maybe, where maybe you control the Devourer and then you spit the poison lasers and stuff like that. That could be really fun. I don't know, but something badass I'd like to see here. But yeah, this is kind of like the TLDR on the Spiritborn. Everything is really strong. Maybe Razor Wings is not really a thing anymore, so that could need some help. But yeah, we have a lot of options, all the core skills. Yeah, basic builds are not really a thing. There is Rock Splitter, but that's like a Thorns build, so it's not really a basic build, I guess. But they all don't really exist. There could definitely be like some options here to open up some stuff for the future, with some of the core basic skills being, you know, maybe some interesting options. But right now we don't really have that. But yeah, I think Spiritborn probably needs the least attention when it comes to the PTR. Just fix the bugs with the halls, maybe buff Centipede Hall, and then we're gonna be looking kind of good here. And that also sums up for this PTR here. So obviously there's a lot of stuff in this video, so I just tried to kind of go through it as fast as I could, but it still got kind of long. It is what it is, a big patch. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there's something I missed that I didn't talk about. I'll probably have some other sort of follow-up videos. And at the very least, I have, well, a lot of stuff in here now and a lot of footage and a lot of planners to make for season 11 when it actually comes. So stay tuned. When the patch notes drop in like a month from now, I'll be posting a bunch of guides, a bunch of videos for all of the classes. So I have a lot of stuff to share then. So for now, hope you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.